13 years ago, Nintendo had a problem with Mario. The company released two brand new Mario games, New Super Mario Bros. 2 and New Super Mario Bros. U, mere months apart, and both games were fine. They were bland, uninspiring, flatly uninteresting is how one reviewer described the games. For Mario, who is supposed to be the jewel in Nintendo's crown, flatly uninteresting is just not good enough. And so, over the next decade, Nintendo's developers worked tirelessly to revitalize the series, creating a Mario game that felt new, fresh, and innovative, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. So, what happened behind the scenes? How did Nintendo get from this to this? Well, to find out, I've dug through dozens of interviews with Nintendo's developers. We'll uncover how 2D Mario got into such a dire state, and what steps Nintendo took to save the series. Here's how Nintendo fixed 2D Mario. Part 1. Mario is too complicated. So, before we get to New Super Mario Bros., we need to quickly look back at Mario's early days. It was in 1985 when Nintendo released the original Super Mario Bros. The game was directed by game design legend Shigeru Miyamoto, assisted by his right-hand man Takashi Tezuka. Over the next decade, the pair worked on a number of follow-ups: Super Mario Bros. 2, 3, World, and Yoshi's Island. But in the early 90s, Nintendo's hardware team began work on a new game console, one designed with 3D graphics in mind. Shigeru Miyamoto set himself the challenge of designing a new 3D Mario adventure to showcase the console's capabilities. The result was 1996's Super Mario 64. Mario 64 was met with near unanimous acclaim, and the Mario development team soon began work on a 3D follow-up, Super Mario Sunshine. So far, so good, right? Except no. Behind the scenes, Shigeru Miyamoto was getting a little worried about Mario. I want Mario to be a game that all audiences can enjoy, something that grandma and grandpa, mum and dad, even little children can easily pick up and play, and right away understand what's fun about it. However, I think Mario Sunshine turned out to be difficult for the average user. It's something I very much regret. I want someone who hasn't played a game in 10 plus years to play our game, but I think such a person wouldn't know what's going on in Mario Sunshine. Miyamoto's solution was to split the Mario series in two. There would be fancy flagship 3D games alongside a new series of simpler 2D Mario games, which would be perfect for beginners. He talked to Takashi Tezuka about this idea, who would be in charge of this new project. And with that, the groundwork was laid for New Super Mario Bros. Part 2. A New Mario. At the very same time that Miyamoto and Tezuka were having their discussion, a handful of young developers at the company were talking about how much they wanted to make a new Mario game of their own. Developers like Shigeyuki Asuke, who grew up playing Super Mario Bros. And had long dreamed of making his own Mario game. It was Asuke and his colleagues who had spent the past few years porting old Mario games to the GBA. But they'd had enough of porting. For Nintendo's next handheld, the DS, they wanted to create their own original Mario title. And so, Asuke and Tezuka came to each other with almost the exact same suggestion. Let's make a new 2D Mario game. And that is the game that would become New Super Mario Bros. So the idea of the New Super Mario Bros. Project was to create a quick, simple Mario game that could be played by anybody. At this point, the DS was fast becoming a hit with non-gamers, thanks to games like Brain Training and Nintendogs. There was already a Mario game on the DS, Super Mario 64 DS, but that was a 3D game and a fairly complex one at that. This newer Mario title, then, would be a small project with a team of around 20 developers who reused a lot of assets from Super Mario 64 DS. The team really wanted to distill and embody the core Mario essence. We were mindful of never destroying the good parts of the previous Super Mario Bros. Games, said Asuke. The result was 2006's New Super Mario Bros., which became a big hit, selling almost 10 million copies in its first year. That's very impressive. And it wasn't just sales. Miyamoto was impressed with the team's work, but he felt the game actually erred a little on the easy side. Yes, a simpler Mario game had been the goal, but Miyamoto was eager to make sure series veterans would enjoy taking on harder challenges too. And so Nintendo swiftly greenlit a second new Mario game, this time on the Wii. New Super Mario Bros. Wii was developed by largely the same team as its predecessor. This time round, the game was quite a bit harder than before. Plus, the addition of up to 4-player multiplayer made the game feel new and fresh. In the end, New Super Mario Bros. Wii went on to become even more of a hit than its DS predecessor, selling over 30 million copies worldwide. That's more than both Super Mario Galaxy games combined. So, by 2009, 2D Mario was on top of the world. Miyamoto had achieved his goal of bringing back lapsed Mario players, along with millions of people who'd never touched a Mario game in their lives. It was looking like the future of New Super Mario Bros. Was bright. But in just a few more years' time, 2D Mario would be in a very different position. Part 3. Too much Mario. With 2 new game consoles on the horizon, Nintendo decided to greenlight not 1, but 2 more New Super Mario Bros. Games. One for the 3DS, Nintendo's new handheld, and one for the Wii U, the follow-up to the Wii. To pull this off, the 2D Mario team split in 2. A team of rookies took on the 3DS game, while the Mario veterans mostly worked on the game for Wii U. Takashi Tezuka, at this point the producer of all 2D Mario games, oversaw both projects. However, each of the 2 games faced some major challenges. First, there's New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS. Rather than the now experienced devs behind New Super Mario Bros. On the DS and Wii, this game's development team was staffed mainly by people new to the Mario series. Leading up to development, Nintendo held what they called Mario Cram School, a sort of boot camp or training session where staff from across Nintendo, whether developers, composers, artists, or admin staff, could learn the basics of Mario level design. Once the project was nearing its end, Yusuke Amano, a young developer who'd worked on New Super Mario Bros. Wii, was invited to play some of the levels created during this Mario Cram School. Then, his boss, Takashi Tezuka, made an announcement. Tezuka-san suddenly asked me if I would like to be the director for the next Super Mario game for Nintendo 3DS. I thought, that's why they had me play those courses. In other words, it came as a total shock. With no experienced designers, Amano had to somehow wrangle the collection of cram school levels into a full game. Plus, this was Amano's first time as a game director. If all of that sounds like a challenge, you're not wrong. Of course, the project was overseen by Takashi Tezuka, but Tezuka had to split his attention between Amano's game and a totally separate game in development for the Wii U. So let's talk about New Super Mario Bros. U. This is the project which the core, experienced Mario developers moved on to after finishing New Super Mario Bros. Wii. With all of the knowledge racked up from the DS and Wii entries, development on this next Mario game should have been a breeze, right? Well, not quite. For one, New Super Mario Bros. U was one of the very first HD games from Nintendo. Across the board, Nintendo's developers found the jump to HD development to be a real challenge. Shigeru Miyamoto publicly stated, "We may have underestimated the scale of this change, and as a result, the overall software development took more time than originally anticipated." Those delays ran in complete opposition to the main goal of New Super Mario Bros. U to launch alongside the Wii U in 2012. Satoru Iwata, company president, said at the time, "We made this game with the desire and a clear mission in mind to create a classic action Super Mario game which absolutely had to be released simultaneously with the new game console." Now, normally Nintendo will delay a game if it needs more time in the oven, if it's not quite ready, but this game was an exception. There was absolutely no wiggle room. The game had to be out the door by November 2012, whatever happened. And so, the developers had to use whatever shortcuts they had available. At the start of the project, almost all of the game's assets were reused from New Super Mario Bros. Wii. In fact, a demo of this early version was made publicly available in 2011, at the time called New Super Mario Bros. Me. One journalist wrote, "The visuals looked essentially indistinguishable from those of New Super Mario Bros. Wii." At this point, the game had less than 18 months until release. In that last stretch of development, staff at Nintendo polished up the visuals some more, along with finalizing the game across the board. In the end, both New Super Mario Bros. 2 and U released as planned in 2012, just 4 months apart. I've already mentioned that both titles were met with a middling critical reception, and that's no surprise. One game was staffed by Mario newcomers with little leadership, and the other had an unmovable deadline which clashed with delays from the jump to HD development. In other words, both projects were fighting an uphill battle from the start, and the fact that both games are still a lot of fun to play, despite lacking much creativity, shows just how talented Nintendo's developers are. But when even Nintendo's president Satoru Iwata was saying this in interviews, I suppose many people may take a quick glance at New Super Mario Bros. 2 and think, oh, it's the usual Super Mario. Then it's clear something needed to change. And the first step of that process was to just stop making Mario games for a bit. Part 4. The hiatus. So, from 2012 all the way until 2023, Nintendo released no mainline 2D Mario platformers. However, that doesn't mean Tezuka and his team were sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Instead, they focused on changing up the Mario formula, releasing a series of experimental Mario games. According to Tezuka, we feel quite strongly about creating things that are in sync with the times. So what does that mean in practice? Well, first came New Super Luigi U, an experimental pack of really difficult levels for the Wii U Mario entry. Visually, the game obviously looks a lot like the previous 4 New Super Mario games, but from a gameplay perspective, Luigi U is something very different. But the next 2D Mario project was even more out of left field, Super Mario Maker. Mario Maker upended the formula entirely, letting players design their own levels and share them online. Tezuka explained, "Most games tend to be about following a predetermined path to solve puzzles. There aren't a lot where you think and create on your own. I wanted to make something that's more like a toy." Then, in 2019, came New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. This is a simple port of the Wii U Mario title with little in the way of bells and/or whistles. However, Tezuka took this as an opportunity to elevate a member of the development team. Shiro Mori, who was programming director of the original title, was promoted to game director with New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. Shiro Mori will be an instrumental figure later in the story, so keep his name in your mind. Now, later that year came Super Mario Maker 2. This was a direct follow-up to the original Mario Maker, but with new gimmicks, level themes, and game styles. However, during press interviews around the game's release, journalists kept asking Takashi Tezuka one question: is this the end of 2D Mario? After all, in Mario Maker 1 and 2, fans created tens of thousands of levels, covering every style, theme, and genre you could possibly think of. How could Nintendo themselves possibly top that? However, according to Tezuka, I kept saying that the next Mario game would be completely different from Super Mario Maker, so there was no need to worry. In hindsight, those kinds of sentiments may have been what motivated me to come up with ideas for the next game. Meanwhile, Shiro Mori had just wrapped up work on New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and after directing a simple port of an old game, he wanted to really stretch his wings and take the lead on a brand new game. So both Shiro Mori and his boss Takashi Tezuka felt like they had a point to prove. They were ready to bring a sense of wonder back into the Mario series. Part 5. A Sense of Wonder. Even by Nintendo standards, Super Mario Bros. Wonder was a unique project. Following Mario Maker 2's release, Takashi Tezuka asked his team to create a new, original Mario platformer, the first one in 11 years. And this time, it was all about creating something full of hidden surprises and wonders. To pull that off, a small team of developers were given an unlimited time frame and budget. That's pretty much unheard of, even within Nintendo. We wanted to create a game with much more to offer than ever before, explained Tezuka. Now, the director of this new game would be Shiro Mori, for the first time directing a totally original project. And right off the bat, Mori was keen to throw away everything from the new Super games. I was focused on creating something completely different from the new Super Mario Bros. Series, he said in an interview. Even from a technological perspective, Mori told the programmers to throw out the game engine used in the new Super Mario Bros. Games, instead creating something new which could serve as the foundation for the future of Mario. High ambitions then. But these lofty goals demanded a more fundamental rethink of the Mario conventions. Shiro Mori explained, "When I think back to the first time I played the original Super Mario Bros. Game, I remember feeling that it was full of hidden surprises and wonders. Coins would come out when you hit the blocks, and your body would grow bigger with super mushrooms. Back then, everything was new and packed with unexpected delights. However, now that the Super Mario games have been enjoyed by players for many years, those things have somehow become ordinary. And so, the development team needed to find new ways to surprise players. The first attempt was this, a new item which would warp players to another world. This appealed to Shiro Mori and team, but when they showed it to Takashi Tezuka, he said, "Warping somewhere else would be no different from previous games. Can't we make it so that the course itself transforms without players having to warp?" That suggestion led to the creation of this prototype, where a classic Mario pipe walks around the screen. There were other ideas too, like having the whole level tilt on its side, with Mario sliding down it. Takashi Tezuka liked these so-called wonder transformations, and requested that every level have its own wonder effect. That's no small task. So, to create the many dozens of wonder effects needed, the team embarked on a huge brainstorming exercise where anyone, from composers to programmers to artists, could write down ideas on a sticky note. In the end, there were over 2,000 of these sticky notes written. Wow. So then the development team split off into lots of small groups of just 2 or 3 people to create prototypes based on these ideas, like the one I showed earlier, for instance, where the level tilted on its side. Here's another prototype where Mario's head turns into giant blocks, and the player must avoid being eaten by enemies. Those thousands of sticky notes led to Super Mario Bros. Wonder's unique sense of whimsy. It really feels like some new, exciting twist is waiting round every corner. But it's not just the Wonder transformations. Everything about Wonder is refreshed compared to previous Mario games. The enemies are new, the stage themes are different, and there's a trio of never-before-seen power-ups that are a real delight. The game's art team were also keen to keep things fresh. They adopted a clever cheat to the camera for the player characters, where Mario and Co.'s facial features are positioned towards the screen, so that you can see all of his facial expressions much more clearly than in previous 2D platformers. The result is really effective. And so, on the 20th of October 2023, Super Mario Bros. Wonder was released to rave reviews. Not only was the game described by reviewers as the best 2D Mario game since Super Mario World, it was also compared very favourably to the new Super Mario Bros. Games which came before it. Wonder made games like New Super Mario Bros. U look drab, dull, and by the numbers. In the end, Mario Wonder sold over 16 million copies in its first 2 years on the market. As of making this video, an expansion for the game comes out next year, which will no doubt lead to a whole new set of players picking up a copy. But sales aside, what Mario Wonder really did was set up the future of 2D Mario. A decade ago, the future of this series looked somewhat bleak, with fun but mediocre being the norm. Games were being pumped out one after another without doing anything unique or exciting. But now, with Wonder, the possibilities for 2D Mario feel truly endless. I can't wait to see what comes next. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video and want to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon page, alongside fine folks like Aaron and Catherine, Arthur Nicole, Bones Vivi, Brett and Eric, Cyprian Eov, Daryl Jero, Ellie Birnbaum, Eliza the Doe, Fresh Poetic, Jim Gilsonan, Kieran Chan, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Rabinstick, Skater Pie, and Thomas Söderlund.